Thanks very much to Rob, because what I'm saying now very much fits in with what he's already been saying, although a lot of what I'm going to be saying is not in relation to the criminal sphere, it's in relation to other types of litigation as well, although we do deal with criminal investigations. A little bit about me and TRL first. So TRL, some of you may know it as formerly as the Transport Research Laboratory, now TRL, because we deal with a lot more than research these days. So I'm a consultant within TRL, within the Forensic Investigations team. Like I say, we are a research department. We have a software development department. We do work in a lot of different countries in relation to traffic management. Like I say, the department I'm in is Forensic Investigations, so we primarily deal with litigation, and we provide a team of experts in relation to criminal cases, civil cases, in fact, any kind of legal case that you might have where you might require an expert. So if you're involved in a collision, if it's a criminal investigation, the police will, especially if it's a fatal investigation, the police will employ an expert. They will have their own team of experts who will look at the collision. And you may need an expert as well. If you go to court and if you are going to be prosecuted, then you're going to want an expert on your side just as much as the police will want an expert on their side. Just a little bit of history about me. So I was a police officer for 30 years, and I was a forensic collision investigator with Merseyside Police for about 8 years as well. So I've seen both sides of both prosecutions and defence. The work that TRL do is, I'd say, in all the spheres, and also we will deal with both prosecution and defence work, and also represent all sides in relation to civil litigation. We also provide training in forensic collision investigation as well for fleet hauliers who want to conduct some investigations in-house. So, the difficulty about my role is I often get involved at the end of a chain of events. And so people come and ask for our assistance and our advice, but largely after numerous things have already taken place, things which we can no longer control. So what I'm going to try and do to you today is explain to you the sort of things you can put in place yourself to gain the best evidence to defend yourself if you're being prosecuted or if you're the subject to litigation, so that when you employ a solicitor who then appoints an expert investigator, that basically you've done all the right things at the beginning to get the best evidence to defend your claim. So, I'm going to give you an example of an investigation that's ongoing, so I can't give you too many details, but basically I'm currently investigating a collision involving a heavy goods vehicle. Over 10 years ago, this collision took place, and it's going to court next year. So it's going to be 11 years from the collision taking place to us going to court. A number of things have happened since then. The managing director of the company has retired. They appointed a forensic collision investigator at the company a number of years ago. He has since retired. The police officer who attended the scene, who took numerous photographs, downloaded the tachograph, so he no longer works for the police. And we've tried to recover the tachograph. We know the tachograph was downloaded because a statement was provided at the time saying what speed the vehicle was travelling at. Unfortunately, the police didn't retain the tachograph data, so I can no longer analyse that data either. The photographs we've been provided have not been in the form of photographs, as in JPEG images. They were, at some point in the last 10 years, were printed out onto paper, rescanned, and the PDF versions of what I've got. So as you can imagine, not particularly great quality. There are numerous witnesses to the events that led to the collision. However, they are all employees who, all bar two, have since moved on to different companies. Part of the investigation was the way in which the vehicle was loaded by a separate company. Unfortunately, the relationship between the haulier and the person who loaded the trailer has long since soured over a dispute over money. They're no longer cooperating with the investigation. I guess the moral to this story I'm telling you is, you need to gain the best evidence very early on and secure it somewhere so that if a claim comes in years to come, you know where to find it and where to get your hands on it. And you should not rely on somebody else gaining that evidence for you. You may see people who are downloading tachographs. You may see people taking photographs and say, oh, it's okay, well, that's been done. That's in the bag. I'll be able to get that at a future date. When the time comes, you might find it very difficult to get that evidence. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain a number of steps that you can take to secure that evidence yourself or to ensure it has been secured. And when you need it, at your time of need, you'll be able to get your hands on it and use it to defend a claim against you or wherever that may be. The police use something called golden hour principles, and it's not an actual hour, it's a metaphorical hour. But what it effectively means is the best evidence is generally that you can gain immediately after the incident. There's a number of different reasons why evidence can be of less quality afterwards. I mean, the last point on that list is a prime example. If you don't get photographs of the scene as they were exactly after the incident, then it's very hard to actually replicate those conditions. If you say, well, the sun was in my eyes, 2 hours later when people come and take pictures and it's gone overcast, it's very hard to defend against that claim. We can go online and we can show the general direction of the sun had there been no clouds, but nothing is better than a photograph taken immediately after the incident. People are very keen to get vehicles patched up and back on the road. So whilst defects might be present, that you may feel were contributory towards the collision, they certainly won't be in a week's time. And if you think something like a street light being not working properly was the cause of a collision, as soon as the council find out that street light is out, you can guarantee by tomorrow morning that'll be fixed. It'll take weeks and weeks if you phone them up any other day, but the moment there's a collision, that'll be fixed the following day, I promise you. So you need to get that evidence as well. Marks on the road are at the most visible immediately after an incident. They can disappear after hours. So if you go back in a week's time, you might find that any kind of skid marks or other marks on the road surface have long since been trafficked away. But importantly, people are at the most interested straight after a collision as well. There's often a big crowd of people around any collision scene showing lots of interest. If you don't take names and addresses at that point in time, you might find it very hard to find these witnesses afterwards because people's lives move on. Once their lives move on, they show very little interest in assisting you. They'll show very little interest in coming to court and supporting you as well. So on the principle that you should get the best evidence early on, what the second bit of advice I would give you is identify volatile evidence and gain that at a very early stage. What do I mean by volatile evidence? We've already spoken about witnesses, they wander off. CCTV is very volatile because that will get overwritten usually within a month. Any commercial system will override the CCTV on the basis that if it wasn't important enough for you to ask within a month, it probably isn't important at all. Something that's particularly volatile are things like tyre pressures. If you don't gain the tyre pressures of a vehicle immediately following a collision, you can never guarantee that the measurements you get were actually representative of those at the scene of the collision. But there's numerous other bits of evidence which, if you don't gain them very quickly, it's going to be very hard to get them at a later date. So other than the volatile evidence, what other evidence could be useful to you to defend a claim? I've put two photographs on there. The first one is the symptoms, and the second photograph underneath is the cause. And we're not going to blame rain necessarily for causing a collision, but if the cause of a road flooding is a blocked drain, then there may be somebody who is responsible for that and will have some responsibility for that particular collision. Other bits of evidence that could be useful are conditions of road markings. I mean, particularly at night, road markings that are very visible during the daytime, sometimes at night, are very hard to see. Collision debris you put under the category of volatile evidence, as that's not going to stay in the road for very long. As soon as the police open up the scene, all the collision debris is going to be swept up. There's lots of other evidence which is not necessarily brought to your attention. Is most police officers at the scenes of collisions now will record the scene on body-worn cameras, very commonly used. So bear in mind that if you ask for that evidence to be preserved at an early date, it can be marked as evidential, and then you could then put a request in to see that evidence. If you don't do that, there's a high possibility that that evidence will be lost at some point in the future. A lot of evidence can be gained from conducting mechanical examinations. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but what I would say is rotor garage storage fees are very high. So whereas in criminal investigations, the vehicle will, especially in fatal collisions, the vehicle will be seized and kept kept in a secure facility. For civil claims, which rumble on for years, no one's going to pay £20 a day or whatever it is to have that vehicle kept in storage. So it's very important that you get your mechanical examinations done at the earliest opportunity before vehicles are released. Another reason to have a mechanical examination, as well as to finding defects such as blown lights or defective brakes or that sort of thing, I'm going to ask you to have a look at these two vehicles that I'm showing you now and just ask you, do you know the difference between them? If you were involved in a collision with one of these two things, do you really know what you're dealing with? Without having an expert on your side to go and examine it and to tell you what it is, would you know what you were dealing with? So I want you to look at those two pictures. The one on the left is a pedal cycle. It's an electrically assisted pedal cycle. It won't exceed 15 miles an hour, but it's effectively a pedal cycle. You don't need anything else other than if you were to ride any other pedal cycle. The one on the right is a motor vehicle. It has 3 times the power than that required by the electrically assisted pedal cycle regulations. And as such, if you were to ride the one on the right on a road, you would need an MOT, a driving licence, lights, insurance. Now, I'm guessing not many people on the road at first glance will be able to distinguish between these vehicles. And if you were involved in a collision, would you know what you were dealing with? Would you know if the person on the other side was committing any offences or not? It's very important to get an expert on your side who can identify these things for you and point these things out so you know exactly what you're dealing with. Scene inspections, we've talked earlier about volatile evidence at the scene, but there's plenty of evidence to be gained through going back to the scene. Now, I've recently dealt with a collision where I've gone back 12 months later and the council have very kindly completely remodelled the junction, which was rather inconvenient and embarrassing because the solicitor had already paid me to conduct the scene examination. However, we can use things like Google Maps and Google Street View to roll back time and look at what things look like in the past. And if push comes to shove, we can use that evidence instead. But there's plenty of evidence we can gain from scene inspections that may help your driver or yourself in defending the claim. Keep an eye on time, not too bad. Okay, CCTV analysis as well. We can analyse CCTV footage for speeds. That's my principal expertise, is speed analysis from CCTV. That can be from dash cams, it can be from static cameras. Doorbell footage. I mean, whoever knew that we were going to be downloading doorbells and obtaining speed of passing vehicles from doorbells, but that's a thing now as well. The important thing about CCTV footage, though, is always download it in the proper manner. Don't record from a monitor. It's so tempting to get your mobile phone out, record off the monitor, there you go, that one's in the bag. You lose so much evidence because you don't get any of the frame interval timing, the metadata, all that information is lost. And yes, you get a moving image, but with basically half the information you would have had unless it was downloaded in the correct manner. Visibility assessments. This could be classed as volatile evidence as well, because although the views from mirrors don't change, they only don't change providing the mirrors aren't adjusted afterwards. Of course, if you put that vehicle straight back into service and the next driver along comes and adjusts the mirrors, or it's involved in a strike with a hedge or a tree or something which knocked the mirrors out, then it's very hard for us to conduct a valid visibility assessment. From visibility assessments, we can plot whether or not things like cyclists, that's the common one, can be seen alongside HGVs, and then from that we can then produce 3D models. I'll make it 2 minutes. Okay. As well as visibility assessments, we can also conduct swept path analysis. So HGVs that go around corners and take out cyclists or pedestrians as they're doing so. The temptation is to just put another driver in the cab and ask them to perform the same manoeuvre. I mean, what are you testing now? Are you testing the wagon? Are you testing the sweep of the wagon? Or are you just testing the competency of a second driver? You have to be very careful about things that initially feel like they make sense to do, but in actual fact, if you don't do it in a scientific method, you're not actually testing what you originally intended to do, and the conclusions you reach will not necessarily be valid. Telematic data we can download. If the airbag goes off in a vehicle, then the modern vehicles now will store 5 seconds worth of speed data leading up to an airbag activation. That can be very useful to us. That's fine whilst we have access to the vehicle, but I'll refer to my earlier comment about mechanical exams. Once the vehicles are released, disposed of, crushed, that data's gone forever. We need to download that quickly before we lose the vehicle. I've got a couple of slides now, and I just want you to have a look at these. I'll make 1 minute. So have a look at this one. Collision scene, possibly a obstruction of view by the car parked on the hard shoulder, potentially down to a microclimate or wet conditions, puddles, underneath that tree. Now, the clue to this question should be in the title, authenticity and integrity, because that picture is actually completely false. It's been made using a very simplistic AI tool to add a car and add a puddle. Now, you might say, well, that's not going to happen to me, but we all know AI is on the horizon, and it's only going to be a matter of time before people is going to be amending evidence, presented in court, and you're going to need an expert to analyse that evidence to check that it is both authentic and has integrity. Digital evidence must meet both of those requirements before we can rely on it for the data it is purported to offer us. And you need an expert on your side to prove those things. Otherwise, you could be faced with that in court. I've been faced with photographs in court that I've challenged, and I've had them withdrawn because they didn't show what they purported to show. But you need somebody bold who can stand there and say, that is not what it says it is. And I make that just over 15 minutes. Thank you.